Good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Kiddushin Daf Ayin Ches, and we are starting on the bottom of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, approximately 15 lines from the bottom at the beginning of the line of Amar le Rav Papa le Abaye. Let's get into this sugya. The Gemara says as follows: Amar le Rav Papa le Abaye. Abaye says to Rav Papa says to Abaye, Yisrael haba al achoso. Terrible scenario where Yisrael is he sleeps with his sister. So definitely Zona Mashvila. For sure, she's now Begeder Zona. And our question for our sugya now is, do we say Chalala Mashvila or Lo Mashvila? Do we say that she becomes a Chalala by sleeping with her brother, or does she only remain a Zona? Mi Amrinan, do we say the following Kal V'chomer? Perhaps B'chayve Lavin Havya Chalala, B'chayve Krisus L'Kol Shekain. If a woman can become a halala through doing an isser that is a lav, maybe we should say that all the more so she becomes a halala if she does an isser that has an isser kares with it. So even though it's true that she's not married to a kohen, she's not a kohen, and her brother's not a kohen. So when they sleep together, the case was that Yisrael who slept with his sister. So in such a case, is she only a zona, or is she all the more so even a halala, because a halala is typically generated even without a isser kares? So to this, the Gemara says the other half, O Dilma, or perhaps, Ein Chalala Elami Isser Kahuna. Is Chalala a din that's limited to the world of Kahuna, or is Chalala applicable even outside of the world of Kahuna? Here, the Gemara seems unequivocal. Amar Le, Abaye answers Rav Papa and says, Ein Chalala Ela me Isser Kahuna Bilvad. It's a reasonable kal v'chomer that you're saying, but it's not lamaisa. What is lamaisa is that we say that there's no din of halala at all in regards to a yisrael. It has to be that we're only talking about a case of halala. Amar Rava mina ha milsa to Amar Rabbanan. Where do we know this which the rabbis say? Vein halala ela me iser kahuna. How do we know that the din of halala only applies by those who are in the world of Kohanim, and it doesn't apply as it relates to our particular case of a Yisrael who is Ba'al Achoso? So to this, the Gemara brings a brisa, 8-9 lines from the bottom of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. The Tanya, the brisa writes, Lo Yomar Grusha beKohen Gadol. We don't need the pasuk to speak about a Grusha in regards to a Kohen Gadol, because V'tesi beKal v'chomer miKohen Hedyot. The Torah already spoke about the fact that a Grusha is not allowed to marry a regular Kohen, all the more so when you're a Kohen Gadol. I don't need those extra words of Grusha by a Kohen Gadol at all. I could have said on my own. Ashta leKohen Hedyot Asura. Now that we know that a Grusha is usher for a regular Kohen, the Kohen Gadol Mibaya, he's just a higher level Kohen. If it's true by a lower level Kohen, by a regular Kohen Pasha, that it would be true by the Kohen Gadol. So therefore, Lama Namra. Why then did the Torah go out of its way to add Grusha to the world of Kohen Gadol if it's so obvious that it applies to all Kohanim? The Gemara says, Kishem shechaluka Grusha, mizona v'chalala b'Kohen Hedyot. Just like there's a distinction between the world of Grusha on the one side and Zona and Chalala in regards to a Kohen Hedyot, Ka Chaluka b'Kohen Gadol. So too it was written explicitly by the Kohen Gadol as well. The Gemara doesn't like this at all. The Gemara says that's Pashut. Of course that's true. Migra Gora, when you become a Kohen Gadol, you get your status lowered from being a regular Gadol. Thing's ridiculous. Of course that she's still going to be a problem for the Kohen Gadol to marry. A Grusha is not allowed to marry a regular Kohen, all the more so. That should be Pashut. Ella, the Gemara changes its equation a little bit, 4 or 5 lines from the bottom. Just like we have certain distinctions between Grusha and Zona and Chalala in regards to Kohen Hedyot, Kach in regards to an Almana, which is not true by a Kohen Hedyot, that's only an Isser by a Kohen Gadol. So by the Almana, Chaluka Migrusha v'Chalala Zona v'Kohen Gadol. There we do see a distinction. So that's why the Gemara says that we have a din of Chalala only by a Kohen. But let's continue. Chalala lama ne'amra. Why does it speak about Chalala? Ein Chalala elami Isser Kehuna. So this is where we see our Mari Makom, and the Brisa stands strong in support of Abaye's approach. Rava brings the Raya, even though Rava wasn't part of the initial conversation. The initial conversation was Rav Papa, asking a question to Abaye. Rava brings the Raya from the Brisa that Ein Chalala elami Isser Kehuna. The Gemara just adds in Vizona Lama Namra. Why by Kohen Gadol do we need to speak about a Zona? The Gemara says Namar Kan Zona Benamar Lahalan Zona. In both cases, we have the word zona. Makan zaro chulin. Af lahalan zaro chulin. It's just to teach us that they're going to be zaro chulin, that both by a kohen hedyot and by a kohen gadol, if there is a ma'aseh nus, the child will be a halal. Amar Rav Ashi, hilkach, therefore, and this therefore requires a little bit of thinking. Kohen haba lachoso. If there's a kohen, not a Yisrael like we started out today, but if there's a kohen who's ba lachoso, who sleeps with his sister, so definitely zona mashvila for sure. However, halala lo mashvila. He's not yet a halala in the first bia. The first bia only causes the sister of the kohen to become a zona. But chazaru vala, if there's tashmish amita a second time, then asa halala, that then would make the sister of the kohen into a halala as well. We're on Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, second line of the page. Amar Rav Yehuda, kohen gadol be'almana lo keshtayim, achas mishum lo yikach ve'achas mishum lo yichala. Rabbi Yehuda says that if a kohen gadol sleeps with an almana, he gets two sets of malkos. One because of lo yikach, because if you look at the pasuk on the side, almana ugrusha b'chalala zona esela lo yikach. You violated the isser of esela lo yikach. And back in the Gemara, 4 lines down, ve'achas mishum lo yechalel, and one as well because of the isser of lo yechalel. Take a look at Rashi, 10 lines down in the Rashi's dibur hamaschal mishum lo yechalel. Rashi says, Shechilel osa, because you made her a chalala, which is itself an Isser D'oraisa. Asks the Gemara, V'lilka nami mishum lo yechalal zaro. It's not just a din in her that she became a chalala. We know that the almana becomes a chalala, but maybe it's also true that there should be a third set of malkos because he turned the child into a chalala. The Gemara says, Bishelo gamar biaso. There's a scenario where it's possible that he was not mazriya, there was no gamar bia. So the reason we have to make such a distinction is to make sure we know where the lines in the sand are. It is definitely the case that with Tashmish Amita alone, that he will have the Isra of Lo Yikach, and he will violate the Isra of Lo Yichalal of making her into a Chalala. And yes, in theory, there could be a case scenario where there's a third set of Malkos for creating a Halal, but we needed to say Shalom Gamar Biaso so that we know that these are separate Isurim. The Bia itself is one set of Isurim, and having a child will bring another set of Malkos for him. Masiv Rava asks, 7 lines down on Ayin Ches Aleph. The Gemara says, Almana ugrusha loke mishum shnei shemos. When we talk about an almana who's a grusha, she gets hit up with 2 sets of malkos because of shnei shemos, one almana and one grusha. My lav shnei shemos v'sulo. Doesn't it sound like there's only 2 sets of malkos for in total, including almana and grusha? The Gemara says, no, lo. It's shnei shemos al zeh v'shnei shemos al zeh. It's 2 isurim for each of those, by the almana and the grusha. He violates lo yikach for each of them, and he violates lo yichalal for each of them. So there's really 4. Yachi, if that's true, says the Gemara, ema seifa, then I don't understand the rest of the brisa. The rest of the brisa reads grusha v'chalusa eno chayev ella, and this word should be not al but mishum. Ella mishum achas. So what does it mean achas? We're talking about 4 isurim or 2 isurim at a minimum. What does achas mean? Hachi kamar eno chayev ella al achas ula onla b'shnei shemos. At a minimum, there's going to be 2 sets of malkos for each one isser that you perform. If there's one ma'aseh with an almana or with a grusha, then there will be 2 sets of malkos. Says the Gemara, that implies v'chalutza derabanan, because what does it say in the sefer that we just learned? It says grusha v'chalutza eino chayev. So we said that by grusha it's shnei shemos. You'll have 2 isurim, one for lo yikach and lo yichalel. But it seems that the word chalutza is left out. Says the Gemara, v'chalutza derabanan. Are you trying to imply that if a kohen sleeps with a chalutza, that's only an isser derabanan? That's not so pashut. V'atanya grusha. The pasuk says grusha, ein liela grusha, chalutza minayin. The brisa specifically asks us about the status of a chalutza, and the Gemara responds, Talmud Omar ve'isha. So we therefore see from the pasuk, from the brisa, that chalutza should be a din d'oraisa for a kohen to sleep with a chalutza. The Gemara says that's not correct. Really, it's midirabanan. Really, chalutza is derabanan. The brisa showed a drasha from the word ve'isha. That, says the Gemara, is vikra asmachta ve'alma. The pasuk is there only to strengthen the fact that there's a din d'Rabbanan, but not to be mashveh the isser of a kohen sleeping with a chalutza into a din d'oraisa. Amar Abaye kidesh loke ba'a loke. Abaye says if there's kiddushin he gets malkos, and if he is boel her then there's malkos. Kidesh loke mishum lo yikach. That's kicha. That's like the beginning of our Masechah of Kicha. Kicha means Te'efrod. So Kicha, says the Gemara, is Malkos. So therefore, if you are just Mekadesh, Harat Nekudesh, Tabazu Kedas Moshe Yisrael, and she accepts, once the Kiddushin is Chal, that's one Isser Doraisa. And if there's Bia to follow, that's a second Isser Doraisa. Kidesh lo kemishum lo yikach, ba lo kemishum lo yechala. Rava Amar Baal Loke. If there's Tash Mishamita, there's Malkos, but Lo Baal Eno Loke. And the Kiddushin alone will not have an Isser. Abaye felt that there would have been an Isser because it says Lo Yikach, but Rava held no. Let's see why. Mishum Dichsiv Lo Yikach Lo Yichalel. Matam Lo Yikach. Why is it that the Gemara says Lo Yikach, that he's not allowed to marry her? That's Mishum Lo Yichalel, so that we don't turn her or a child into a Chalal or a Chalala. So if that's true, says the Gemara, so then the only reason as to why we have an Isser of Kiddushin over here is because of the fact that we don't want there to be a status of a Chalal. And therefore, we're stuck. Therefore, it has to be that there's only one Isser when someone proposes to this Almana, and that Isser is going to be only on the Bia, but not on the Kiddushin. Umode Abaye. Abaye agrees even with Rava that in the following case, b'machzir grushaso, that a man who remarries a woman who he was originally married to, but in the interim she was engaged, she was married to somebody else. In such a case, she'in kidesh v'lo baal she'eno loke, because the pasuk there says v'lakach taliyos lo liisha marachmana v'haleka. There's no marriage there; they're not allowed to get married. So there, even Abaye would agree that there's no isser, that there's an isser, but there's no malchus by the kiddushin. We're just about halfway down on the first of the wide lines on Ayin Chesem and Aleph, and the Gemara says as follows: Umode Rava bekoin gadol be'almana sheim baal v'lo kidesh sheloke. And Rava agrees and acquiesces to Abaye in regards to a kohen gadol who marries an almana, that if he has tash mishamita with her, sheim baal v'lo kidesh sheloke, because v'lo yechalal zaro be'amav amarachmana v'harei yuchilel. Whether or not there's kiddushin, he was mechalel. And therefore the Isser applies by the Bia and not by the Kiddushin. Ushnehem, both of them, Abaye and Rava, they both agree in the following case. Ushnehem modim b'machzor grushaso, that in the case of a man who remarries his original wife after she was married to a different man in between, she'im bal v'lo kidesh she'eno loke, that if there was Bia without Kiddushin, in such a case that there's no Malkos, because derech likuchen asra Torah, only through likuach, only through kicha, only through halachic engagement would that be the case, that they would in fact have been married, and because there was no kicha, so therefore there's still going to be, there would be no isser, there would be no malchus, I should say, if they're boa without a case of kiddushin. The Gemara says now halfway down on Ayin Chesem at Beis, where 4 lines into the wide lines, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Bas Ger Zachar Kebas Chalal. We made a comparison of a basker, that she's like a chalal, and that there are limitations as to who she can marry, that she's not allowed to marry a kohen. The Gemara says, Tanya, we have a brisa like this. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, basker zachar kebas chalal zachar. Clear, black on white. But here is an addition to our Mishnah. V'hadin nosein. We see over here, v'hadin nosein, that there's a kal v'chomer. Ma chalal sheba mitipa ksheira bito psula. The chalal came from, let's say in this case, a kohen gadol who married an almana. By him, the tipa is a tipa kshera. He's not a chalal, the father. The kohen gadol is never a chalal. So the tipa, the zera, is perfect. But ger sheba mi tipa psula, a ger who, when he was born, his parents weren't Jewish, so he was bami tipa srucha, tipa psula, from a goyish zera. Einu din shebito psula. All the more so we should say by a ger. A ger should be more chazak, be more puzzled than it should be by a case of a chalal. It says the Gemara, not necessarily true, because ma'ala chalal shekain yitzi raso be'avera. But maybe by a case of chalal, there the isser was the tash mishamita, but that's not true by a ger. A ger, the baby was just born to 2 goyim. There's nothing wrong with that. So why then should we be concerned? At all about comparing a chalal to a ger, because at the end of the day, the ger was born in a way that was mutter, and the chalal was born in a way that was asur. Says the Gemara, kohen gadol be'almana yochiach. We can already learn out the problem to this answer from the world of a kohen gadol who has a child with an almana. There, she'ein yitzi raso be'avera, the creation of that child, meaning the zera, was not problematic, but bito psula, still his daughter's a chalal.
Says the Gemara, wait 1 second, that's not a good comparison either, because Mala Kohen Gadol Ba'almana Shekain Biyaso Ba'avera. Maybe the Zera is fine, but the Bia is Aser. So therefore, maybe it's not allowed to be compared. So says the Gemara, Chalal Yochiach. Maybe that we can learn out from a Chalal. And to this, the Gemara says, V'chazar Hadin. We have a couple of questions on a couple of Mari Makomos, but when we weave together the Mari Makomos, then we are clean and free. So that's what the Gemara does, as we've seen this template before. We're learning from Chalal, we're learning from Kohen Gadol, we're learning all of these different cases together. And the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, V'chazar Hadin. The din becomes a loop. Lo re'izeh ki re'izeh, hatzad hashav sheben she'enu berov hakal. Just like the case of a chalal is not normal, that's not the majority of people, and therefore there the daughter is a bito psula. So afani avi es hager she'en berov hakal bito psula. So a little loosey-goosey, because there's a lot of things that aren't rove, and we don't make general principles from it, but that's what the Gemara assumes over here. So the Gemara says, wait 1 second. But still, even if you want to try the lower izeh, you want to try the loop of different possible answers, it's still not bulletproof. And the reason it's not bulletproof, because there's a major difference with those common denominators. You're right. Both halal and ger are cases that are not rove of the world. But there's a big difference between them, one that's strong enough to not allow this answer to take effect. And that is that the halal was born be'isr, and the ger was not. So therefore, the Gemara says, you're right. Lo tema kohen gadol ba'almana yochiach. We shouldn't bring a raya, as we did a few lines ago, that we should learn from the world of almana. Ema, perhaps we should say that we're going to learn from Mitzri Rishon Yochiach, from a first generation Mitzri. Mala Mitzri Rishon shekin eno ra'ui lavo bekal. Says the Gemara, you might be concerned that maybe a Mitzri can't be compared because he's anyways not allowed to join the Kahal in the first generation, only in the third generation. Chalal Yochiach, the Chalal will answer up for that one. And then over here we have a new loop, one that leaves out the Almana and Kohen Gadol, which had a Bia Be'isr, because by the Mitzri there was no Bia Be'isr, so more comparable. V'chazar Hadin, Lo Re'izeh Ki Re'izeh, Atzad HaShavish Sheben, She'enu Barov Kahal B'to Psula. Just like by the case of the Mitzri, we see that there's a tzad hashavah, there's a common denominator, that it's not rov of the kahal, and the daughter is going to be psula. Afani avias hager she'enu berov kahal b'to psula. So the Gemara tries attempt number 2 with a loop to answer. And the Gemara says, hold on 1 second. But there is no psul bi over here by the ger. He did not do anything wrong. You can't really compare the chalal to the ger. At least that's what the Gemara is pushing back and trying to say. So to this, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, ger nami posel bibiyaso. Oh, he says there is a psul by the ger, by the bia, that when they have a child, then there's an element of psul. And he does taka learn out from our Gemara, the din of our Mishnah. He learns that a ger is comparable to a halal, and that both of them are not allowed to marry a kohen from the ma'atzad, ma'atzad shavish behen. That the common denominator is that they're not the rov and the daughters are psulin by halal. Same is true by a ger. That's what the Gemara concludes. All of that is shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Then the Gemara says, Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov Omer. That's coming from our Mishnah, and let's analyze what that Mishnah had to say. So the Gemara says, oh, that's not where the Mishnah is. Yeah, the Mishnah is on the top of Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov had said that a Yisrael who marries a Giores, the daughter is Ksheira Lekahuna. And he said a Ger who marries a Bas Yisrael, the daughter's also Ksheira. But if both parents are Gerim, then the daughter's Psula Lekahuna. So let's analyze these dinim. We're 8 lines or so from the bottom at the 2 dots. It says the Gemara Tanya, we have a brisa. Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Giores Pchusa mi Bas Shalosh v'yom echad, Ksheira Lekahuna. If you have a Giores, she's 2.5 years old, she is Ksheira Lekahuna. Because even though in general as that relates to a Goy, we have an assumption that there is Zona, but over here, if she's Pachos Mikimel Shan of Yom Echad, even if there was Nus, the Basulim would grow back. So then she's going to be Ksheira Lekahuna, no problem at all. She'd have the din of a Basula. So how would we know she's Ksheira? Says the Gemara, that all of the taf, the young children, we're assuming they're super young, that they should be kept alive. Hello, Pinchas Hayimam, and Pinchas was there at that time in regards to that pasuk. So he's a Kohen. So perhaps they were marriageable. So we see that the that the young girl who's under 3 years old is able to marry Kohanim. What do you do with the pasuk of Hechyu Lachem, that these girls can stay alive, these little children? It says the Gemara, La'avadim u'l'shvachos, they can be kept for avadim and shvachos, but they can't be used for anything else. They can't be married. The Chula and Mikra Echad Darshu, really all of them are learning from the same exact pasuk. All of the various Rishonim in regards to the din of a ger. We've seen a variety of shitas. We're going to review them now based on this pasuk. So when the Gemara says v'chula and mikra echad darshu, it's talking about all the shitas in the Tanaim. Let's review. Almana ugrusha lo yikchu lehem nashim kim besulos mizera beis Yisrael. And an almana and a grusha, they should not marry women except for people who are virgins mizera beis Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda savar adi is kol zera Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda was stark. He said both parents need to be Yidden, in order for the child to be able to marry a Kohen. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov sabar mizera vafilu mikza zera. Even if only one parent is going to be a ger and one is regular, as long as there's one regular Yisrael parent, then you're good to go. Rabbi Yossi sabar misha nizreu be Yisrael. We're only talking about misha nizreu, that they were able to both be born non-Jews as long as they converted. And then the Tashmish Hamita was done in a way where it was after they were Yisraelim. Ben Yochai Savar, Mishnizra Besuleha Be Yisrael. He is the most lenient, that as long as she can recover from a bia from before the age of 3, so that her Besulim are healed by the age of 3, she can also marry the Kohanim. These are the various shitas in the Tanaim based on that passage. The Gemara continues on the very bottom line of Ayin Chesim and Aleph. The Gemara says as follows. Amar le Rav Nachman the Rava. Rav Nachman says to Rava, top of Ayin Chesim and Beis, Hai Kra Resha B'Koin Gadol V'Seifa B'Koin Hedyo. Seems a little bit odd. I didn't pick up on this. The Gemara starts out where it says V'Chulan Mikra Echad Darshu, 4 lines from the bottom on Ayin Ches. Look at the pasuk there. Almana Ugrusha Lo Yikhu Lahem Lanashim. So that's Kohen Gadol language. Ki'im Besulos Mizera Yisrael, which applies to the different set of Kohanim. So the beginning and end of the psukim don't seem to be the same thing. So Hai Kra Resha B'Kohen Gadol V'Seifa B'Kohen Hedyo. V'Hecha Tesi. Could you say such a thing, that the psukim just split in the middle and they change topics midstream? Amar Le In. He says absolutely, that happens all the time. This is Rava. This is what Rav Nachman asked Rava, and Rava responded, yeah, that does happen. Because of krahachim, we have other precedents in psukim where we see that the beginning of the pasuk saying one thing and the end is saying something different. So he says, Amar Le In. Rava says for sure, D'chsiv v'ner Elokim term yichbe u'shmuel shochei beheichal Hashem. The pasuk says that before the flame goes out, a reference to Eli's death. Over here, we see that Shmuel was shochei beheichal Hashem, but Shmuel's not allowed to be shochei beheichal Hashem. V'alo ein yeshiva b'azor l'malchei beis David bilvad. So Shmuel can't possibly be lying down. Ella, says the Gemara, Ner Elokim terem yichbe. Where did this take place? Beheichal Hashem. And when the pasuk says Shmuel shochei, that's b'makoma. So we see that a pasuk in the beginning and the end are talking about even different physical settings. The beginning of the pasuk was talking about the heichal. The end of the pasuk was talking about in Shmuel's home, and therefore we see that psukim can be bifurcated. Says the Gemara, the pasuk reads, we're on Ayin Chesim at Beis, 7 lines down. V'ha'almana asher ti almana mikoin yikachu. Mikoin in mi Yisrael lo. If there's an almana that he's going to marry, the Kohen Hedjot's going to marry, it can only be from a marriage of a Kohen. Well, what if the marriage was to a Yisrael? That's for sure not the case, because the status of almana can be from anyone, even from a Yisrael. Says the Gemara, Hachi kamar mikoin yikachu, misha'ar kohanim yikachu. All of the other Kohanim are allowed to marry this woman, provided that she's an almana and it's a Kohen Hedjot. The almana can't marry Kohen Gadol. Tanya Nami Hachi, the Bryce is like this also. Mikohen yikachu, misha'ar kohanim yikachu. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, minha masiyim le kehuna yikachu. From those who are able to marry the Kohanim, that she should be taken. Rabbi Yehuda letaime de Amar bas ger zachar kibas chalot zachar kol shatanose bito atanose manaso. If you're able to marry the daughter, then you're able to marry the almana, and otherwise not. That brings us to the 2 dots, 1/3 of the way down. We're going to be heading to the Mishnah toward the bottom of the page. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Av ger shenasa giores, even if it were to be a ger shenasa giores, and this is the last shita in the Mishnah on Ayin Zayin Amar Aleph. I believe it's the last shita. Yes, it is. Av ger shenasa giores bito ksher leguna. Even if both parents are considered to be gerim, if they are gerim, their child can still marry into the kahuna. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Hamnuna Mishmedu Lahalacha Kerab Yosi, we seem to hold like Rab Yosi, V'chein Amar Rabba Bar Barchan Halacha Kerab Yosi. Miyom Shachar Beis Hamikdash, but from the Churban Anan, Noagu Kohanim Silsul Ba'atzman, they were particularly strict on themselves not to marry the daughter of Gerim, Kerab Elazar ben Yaakov, Kerab Elazar ben Yaakov, and Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Lihuna, Balimlach, Morim Lo, Kirab Elazar ben Yaakov. If in fact people ask a shaila, can I marry? The point says, can I marry the daughter of those gerim? So then we teach them l'chumra. But nasa, if in fact they're already married, then we're mekel. If a man already married the daughter of gerim, ein motzian osa mimenu kirab yosi. Says the Gemara halfway down, Ha'omer benizeh mamzer. Says not very good family dynamics. If parents say, my child is a mamzer, meaning the woman is admitting that she had an illicit relationship while she was married. Eino ne'eman. This is the first case of the Mishnah is actually talking about the father. But v'afilu shneimod, and even if the mother agrees, al ha'ubar shebeme'eha mamzer hu einim ne'eman, and both of the parents, doesn't matter. Even the woman, she knows more than he does because she's the one who conceived. Doesn't matter. The child is still not a mamzer. Yudomer ne'emanim, that they are believed. Let's dig in. My ve'afilu shneim. What is it that you're saying that even if both of them say that the child is a mamzer? Lomi boya kamar. It's teaching me something obvious. Not only this, but even that. Lomi boya ihu delo kimle. Him for sure we don't trust because he wasn't there. She'll know if she conceived from someone else. She'll know if she cheated. Ela afilu ihi dekimla. Even by her when she knows who she slept with. So then the Gemara says still lo mehemna. And another velomi baya. Velomi baya hecha de isle chazaka de kashrus de lo mehemne. It's not just when there's a chezkas kashrus that we don't believe her. Elafilu ubar nami de lesle chazaka de kashrus. The ubar doesn't have a status of kashrus. We have no idea where the ubar came from. In general, the father's halachic relationship to a child is a chazaka. So over here, the Gemara says that that's not called a chazaka de kashrus. Afal pikein lo mehemne. Even when there isn't a chezkas kashrus, and there's a stam neutral chazaka in regards to the ubar, and we have the mother still saying the b'ni mamzer, we still don't believe her. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ne'emanim. Rabbi Yehuda says we do believe the parents when they say such things. Kiddushin, yakir. The pasuk says by a bechor yakir yakirenu le'acherim, that the owner of the bechor is allowed to say that this animal is a bechor. So says the Gemara, Mikan Amar Rabbi Yehuda Ne'eman Adam Lomar Zebeni Bechor. That the father, Rabbi Yehuda says that a father is allowed to say that this animal is my Bechor. Uchashem Sheneman Adam Lomar Zebeni Bechor. Just like a father, an owner, is believed to say that this animal is a Bechor. Kach Ne'eman Adam Lomar Zeben Gerusha Zeben Chalutza. You can also say that this person's a Ben Gerusha or Ben Chalutza, and by extension, even a Mamzer. The Chachamim say that they are not believed. Amar le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak le Rav Bishlam le Rabbi Yehuda. I understand according to Rabbi Yehuda, Hainu dechsiv Yakir. He understood the pasuk of Yakir to teach us that he's able, as an owner, to stipulate that this animal is a bechor. Ela le Rabbanon, according to the rabbis who are the dissenting opinion against Rabbi Yehuda and say that Eino Ne'aman, what do they do with the pasuk of Yakir? The Gemara says Yakir lamali. Says the Gemara betzarech hekera. That's just for him to do a general recognition of the animal, but but they don't mean in general that you can extend it. It's just by case of bechor where there's an element of suffix. Says the Gemara, Lamai Hilchasa, for what purpose are you saying that? Lases lo pishnayim. If you're saying that it's in regards to identifying which child should get pishnayim, that's pshita lama likra. Migu di iboy meis vale matana milo yavale. I can give my oldest, my bechor, more a gift if I want to give it to him. I don't need permission from the Torah to do that. So the Gemara, you're right in regards to that, but we're talking about a case scenario where the father ended up having already given out his Yerusha, and then he got another $1 million from aunt so-and-so, an aunt in the family who passed away. That money, where does it go? He can direct it however he wants. That's the Chiddush of the Gemara. And according to Reb Meir, who says that something that's lo ba la'olam, that it hasn't happened yet, something in the future, namely, that case of nechasim shenaflu la'achar mikan, if he says that Adam is makna davar shelo ba'olam, then what do we need yakir for? Because then the bechor, whatever the breakdown of the monies would already be decided, because he says that you can be makna davar shelo ba'olam. Says the Gemara, shenaflu lo kshu goses. It happened when he was a goses, and it wasn't automatic in that case. There, the father has the right to say that this person's a bechor, or he gets the gift, he gets the extra money. We'll stop right here. In Yirtzeh Hashem, we'll pick up tomorrow night in person at the new Mishnah, 4 lines from the bottom on Ayin Ches Amud Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful day.